Hello and welcome to Western Washington History. Most of us have used Johnny's seasoning at least once in our lives, and some of us wouldn't want to cook without it. Let's take a dive into the life of John Meeker and find out how this amazing season is connected to Western Washington. John Meeker, or Johnny, or Jack, as he was sometimes called, was born in Chicago in 1905 to Albert and Elizabeth Meeker. By the time he was 5 years old, his family moved to Western Washington. The 1910 census shows their address at 1912 14th Avenue South, Seattle. The census showed Johnny's dad was a meat cutter in 1910. 10 years later, in 1920, the census shows the Meekers lived at 1532 32nd Avenue South, Seattle. The house may be there, but it is not visible from the road. At this point, his dad was manager of a meat market. Finding information out for this video has not been easy. The census records were simple enough, but things are about to get questionable. According to Johnny's at Fife website, Johnny began working as an apprentice meat cutter at Pike's Place Market in 1915. He would have been 10 years old at that point. He goes on to say that in 1921 he opened a butcher shop with his father at the corner of First and Pike. Over the next 10 years they kept the butcher shop going and opened up a restaurant in Seattle, as well as a restaurant at the construction site of the Grand Coulee Dam in eastern Washington. In 1928, John and Myrtle Marguerite Riley were married in Seattle. John and Myrtle would have a daughter in 1931. She was named Jacqueline Meeker. She later married Ken Mackey and went by the name Jackie Mackey. The butcher shop was moved in 1932 to the Queen City Market at 4th and Pine. In 1937, he moved the shop again to Bell Street Terminal, where they supplied meat to ships as well as individual customers. Sometime before the 1940 census, John and Myrtle divorced. The 1940 census shows Myrtle living with 2 children alone in Seattle and working as a receptionist. Johnny, along with his business partner, Mrs. E. Crawford, opened Crawford's Sea Grill in 1940. Mrs. E. Crawford may have been the same one who ran a barber shop in Seattle. Possibly was the head nurse at a hospital she helped open in Leavenworth. Not too sure. I would like to look into her life more closely in the future. Either way, Crawford's Sea Grill was located on the waterfront in Seattle near the ferry terminal at 333 Elliott Avenue West. Johnny's dad died in Seattle in 1944. Also in 1944, Johnny was married to Beulah May Fingard. In 1946, Mrs. Crawford and Johnny opened another Crawford's in Tacoma at 505 South Broadway. Johnny's at Fife says on their website that he sold the butcher shop and the Seattle Crawfords in 1944 and moved to Tacoma and opened the Broadway location, but reliable sources say that the Tacoma location was opened in 1946. By reliable, I'm talking about an actual Tacoma News Tribune article celebrating the opening as well as discussing the demolition of the building previously on the site. Either way, when the Seattle Crawfords was sold, it was sold to Nick Zanades, who owned and operated it until Ivor bought it in 1964 and moved his Captain's Table restaurant to that location. He remained in business until 1991 when Ivor executives closed that location and opened Ivor's at Muckleteal Landing. The Tacoma Broadway location of Crawford's was at the site of the old Nelson Bennett Mansion. A new building was built. It was designed by architects Russell, Lance, and Mary. In 1947, the VFW, or Veterans of Foreign Wars, opened the Wild West Veterans Club inside of Crawford's Tacoma location. There were 2 lounges in the Tacoma location. The Star Room opened in 1949 and the Terrace Room opened in 1950. The Terrace Room was designed by architect Marshall Perot and was surrounded by glass windows and a lovely view of Commencement Bay. The census shows Johnny and Beulah lived at 2915 North 12th Street in Tacoma in 1950. In 1952, Johnny sold Crawford's in Tacoma and retired. It was sold to the Pacific Telephone Accounting Office. They remodeled the building, and then in 1978 it became Broadway Sporting Goods. The building has since been torn down. I know you don't believe the story ends there, because in 1954 Johnny came out of retirement and opened a new restaurant, Johnny's Dock, on Pier 3 in Tacoma. It was a beautiful building out on the end of the pier. People loved the food served in the 2 Crawford locations as well as the new Johnny's Dock. A lot of that love can be attributed to Johnny's special seasoning he had taken a lifetime to perfect. From back in the days of working with his dad when he would develop new rubs for the meat, through the years with Crawford's he would use his special seasonings. In 1956, his wife Beulah came up with the idea to package it and sell it to the customers at the restaurant. It was a big hit. Things went smoothly for a few years as sales of the seasoning grew. Then disaster struck. Johnny's dock on Pier 3 caught on fire in the morning the day after Christmas 1961. Damage was estimated to be $450,000, but the insurance paid for it and the restaurant was rebuilt. The next year, in 1962, the World's Fair came to Seattle, and so did Johnny's. He had a booth and sold many jars of his seasoning salt as well as ice cream, according to the internet. Johnny's seasoning salt was in grocery stores in the area not long after that. The brand soon had salad dressing and other seasonings for sale. When the Tacoma Mall opened in 1965, Johnny's was there, opening with them, with a new restaurant called Johnny's on the Mall. I am unsure when this restaurant closed. Johnny was on a roll and opened a new restaurant in 1968 called Johnny's at Fife. It was located at 5211 20th Street East in Fife. Johnny ran the restaurant until 1986. After that, his grandson, John Crabhill, took over the operation. The Port of Tacoma decided to make a major expansion, and Johnny's was in the way. The restaurant moved in 1977 to 1900 East D Street in Tacoma. Johnny's only biological child, Jackie, died in 1990. The red Cadillac driving, cigar smoking Johnny Meeker passed away in 2001 at the age of 96. Both Johnny's Dock and Johnny's at Fife were closed in 2020 during the COVID pandemic, and there seems to be no hope of them reopening again. As for the seasoning salt, Johnny's Fine Foods, which was being run from 319 East 25th Street, Tacoma, was sold years ago and is the only one who survived the pandemic shutdown. Still a big seller, Johnny's Seasoning is now being sold all over the world. They have come out with a no MSG version that I have to try. The ingredients are on the package, but the amounts of each are a closely guarded secret. When Johnny's Fine Foods was sold, the secrets were transferred in a black folder that has all of the original recipes for each product inside. The current owners follow the recipes closely. Production moved from Tacoma to Woodinville in 2017, and as of that time, marketing and sales offices would remain at the 25th Street Tacoma location. Sadly, the restaurants are gone, but for now, Johnny's Seasoning Salt remains. Go and get yourself some while it's still made the same, because as we've seen with many other Northwest favorites, it could be sold and gone in the blink of an eye. Thank you for watching the video, and if you enjoyed it or even learned something, give it a like. And remember, what you do today will be history tomorrow, so make it count.